A billionaire heir trapped in an arranged marriage meets a struggling artist who shows him what real love means. This heartbreaking story explores the price of duty versus desire, featuring shocking betrayals, impossible choices, and a love that threatens to destroy everything. The crystal champagne flute shattered against the marble floor of Damien Cross's penthouse, sending shards across Italian leather shoes that cost more than most people's rent. At 28, he owned half of Manhattan's skyline, yet standing in his floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city breathe below, he felt more trapped than the pigeons pecking at breadcrumbs on his balcony. "Mr. Cross?" his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom, sharp with nervous energy. "Your father requires your presence in the study, immediately." Damien's reflection stared back from the window's sharp jawline inherited from 3 generations of ruthless businessmen. Gray eyes that had learned to hide everything, dark hair perfectly styled to match magazine covers he never asked to be on. He looked like success. He felt like a fraud. The study reeked of Cuban cigars and disappointment. Theodore Cross sat behind his mahogany desk like a judge preparing to deliver a death sentence. At 65, he'd crushed more dreams than the stock market crash of '08. Tonight, his cold blue eyes promised another casualty. "Tomorrow, you'll propose to Evangeline Whitmore." No greeting, no warmth, just business. The merger between Cross Industries and Whitmore Holdings depends on this union. The board expects an engagement announcement by month's end. The air in the room turned thin. Damien's chest tightened like a vice closing around his ribs. "Father, I barely know her. We've met maybe 5 times at charity galas. Love is a luxury we cannot afford." Theodore's voice could have frozen hell itself. "Evangeline comes from proper, stock-educated, beautiful, and most importantly, her family's shipping empire will expand our global reach. The prenup is already drafted. What if I refuse?" The temperature in the room dropped another 10 degrees. Theodore stood slowly, his 6-foot frame casting shadows across family portraits of men who'd all made similar sacrifices for the Cross name. "Then you'll have nothing. No company, no trust fund, no inheritance. You'll be cut off completely. And I'll make sure no respectable firm in the country will hire you. Is your romantic idealism worth losing everything your great-grandfather built?" Damien stared at his father's fascia face, carved from marble and disappointment. This was the man who'd missed every birthday, every school play, every moment that mattered, all in service of building an empire that felt more like a tomb. "The ring is in my safe," Theodore continued, returning to his desk. "Cartier, 5 carats. Flawless. Like your future wife. Like your future. Don't disappoint me, Damien. We both know you're all I have left to carry on the Cross legacy." Walking back to his penthouse, Damien's footsteps echoed through marble hallways lined with priceless art he'd never chosen. His phone buzzed with a text from Evangeline. "Darling, I heard the wonderful news. Daddy says we'll make a perfect power couple. Can't wait for tomorrow." He threw the phone onto his Italian leather couch and walked to his balcony. The city sprawled endlessly below, millions of lights representing millions of people who were probably free to love whoever they wanted. The irony tasted bitter in his mouth. His great-grandfather's portrait watched him from across the room. Aldrich Cross, the man who'd started with nothing and built an empire through sheer will and calculated cruelty. Family legend said he'd given up the love of his life to marry a wealthy widow who'd funded his first shipping venture. Was it worth it? Damien whispered to the painting. All this money, all this power, but no soul left to enjoy it? The portrait offered no answers, just the same cold stare that ran through Cross blood like ice through veins. Tomorrow, he would propose to a woman who felt more like a business acquisition than a potential wife. Tomorrow, he would seal his fate with a 5-carat lie. Tomorrow, he would become everything he'd spent his life trying not to be. But tonight, for these last few hours of freedom, Damien Cross stood on his balcony and wondered what love might have felt like if he'd been born anyone else, anywhere else, into any family that believed hearts were worth more than stock portfolios. 3 days after the proposal that felt more like a business merger, Damien sat across from his new fiancée at La Bernardine, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. Evangeline Whitmore was flawless in the way diamonds were flawless beautiful, cold, and cut precisely to catch light without warmth. "I've scheduled our engagement photos for Thursday," Evangeline said, delicately cutting her salmon with surgical precision. "The photographer shoots for Vogue. We'll make the society pages by weekend." Her platinum blonde hair caught the candlelight as she spoke about their future like quarterly earnings reports. Damien nodded at appropriate intervals while his soul suffocated slowly, one scheduled appearance at a time. "Are you even listening?" Evangeline's Arctic blue eyes narrowed slightly. "This merger, I mean marriage, requires both of us to be present, Damien. Of course, the opera Friday, then the Winterbourne charity auction." He'd memorized her schedule like a death sentence countdown. After dinner, Damien made excuses about urgent business calls and drove aimlessly through the city. His Lamborghini felt like a coffin with leather seats. Every street corner seemed to mock him with reminders of the life he was about to lose forever. Washington Square Park at midnight was a different world. Street musicians played for a handful of coins, lovers shared benches under lamplight, and life happened without corporate oversight. Damien parked and walked among the shadows, breathing freely for the first time in days. That's when he saw her. A young woman sat cross-legged on the ground before an easel, completely absorbed in her work. Dark curls escaped from a paint-splattered bandana, and her movements flowed like water as she brought color to canvas. She was painting the park's fountain, but not as it was as it felt. Bold, emotional strokes that made the familiar landmark look magical, alive, urgent. "It's beautiful," Damien said softly. Stopping near her makeshift studio, she looked up, startled, and Damien felt something shift in his chest. Her eyes were warm brown, flecked with gold, like chocolate sprinkled with stardust. It's close. He could see paint under her fingernails, a small scar above her left eyebrow, the genuine curiosity that lit her face. "Thank you." She smiled, and Damien forgot how to breathe properly. "I know it's not technically perfect, but perfect is overrated," Damien interrupted, surprising himself. "This has soul." "Are you an artist?" Luna asked, studying his face with an artist's eye for detail. Damien almost laughed. "No, I'm a businessman, though I used to sketch when I was younger." The admission surprised him. He hadn't thought about those abandoned dreams in years, hadn't remembered the boy who'd drawn birds and tree houses before duty replaced desire. What kind of business? Luna packed her supplies while they talked, movements efficient from practice, analogy. Mostly boring stuff. He deflected, unwilling to shatter this moment with talk of billions and board meetings. "Nothing's boring if it's yours," Luna said, slinging her art bag over her shoulder. "I work 3 jobs just to afford paint, but each one teaches me something about people, about life." As they walked toward the park exit, Luna explained her complicated existence. Mornings at a flower shop, where she learned about growth and patience. Afternoons teaching art to children at a community center where she discovered joy and pure creativity. Evenings waiting tables at a small Italian restaurant where she observed human nature in its most honest form. "Sounds exhausting," Damien said, though he felt more energized by her passion than he had in months. "Sounds like living," Luna replied with a smile that could power the city. They ended up at an all-night diner that served coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Luna ordered tea and a slice of pie, apologizing for the modest choice. Damien, who regularly spent more on lunch than most people earned in a week, found her humility refreshing. "So what makes you happy?" Luna asked, stirring honey into her tea. The question hit Damien like a physical blow. When had anyone asked him that? When had he last considered it? "I don't know," he admitted. "I've spent so long doing what I'm supposed to do, I've forgotten what I want to do." Luna studied his face with concern that felt genuine. "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard." As the night wore on, they talked about dreams deferred and roads not taken. Luna spoke of wanting to open her own gallery someday, showcasing local artists who couldn't afford Manhattan rents. Damien found himself sharing childhood memories of building tree houses and sketching birds before duty replaced dreams.
Why did you stop drawing?"
Luna asked gently. "My father said it was impractical, that art doesn't build empires. Empires aren't worth building if they cost you your soul." Luna said quietly. Her words struck something deep within Damien's chest, like a key turning in a lock he'd forgotten existed. When Luna's phone buzzed with a reminder about her early morning shift, reality crashed back. They'd been talking for 4 hours. 4 hours where Damien had felt more like himself than in years of board meetings and family dinners. I should go, Luna said reluctantly. Wait, Damien reached for his wallet, then stopped. Money felt wrong here. It's insulting even. Could I see you again? Maybe you could show me more of your art. Luna smiled, and Damien felt something shift in his universe. I'd like that, but I should warn you I'm not exactly high society material. Good, Damien said, meaning it completely. Society is overrated. As Damien drove home through empty streets, his phone rang. Evangeline's name flashed on the screen like a reminder of his real life waiting to reclaim him. Did you disappear too tonight? Daddy wants to discuss the engagement timeline. Damien stared at the phone, then at the business card Luna had given him. It was hand-painted with tiny flowers, listing her 3 jobs in cheerful script that felt more real than any contract he'd ever signed. I had some business to attend to, he said finally. Well, don't let it happen again. We'll have appearances to maintain. After hanging up, Damien sat in his car outside his building, holding Luna's card like a lifeline. For the first time in his adult life, he had a choice to make. Not between companies or investments, but between the life he'd been given and the life he might actually want. The golden cage had always felt secure. But tonight, he'd glimpsed what freedom might look like. It had paint under its fingernails and stardust in its eyes. 3 weeks passed like stolen moments between heartbeats. Damien lived as 2 different menthe dutiful heir by day. Someone entirely new by evening. Every spare minute was spent with Luna, exploring a world he never knew existed, just blocks from his penthouse prison. Luna worked mornings at Petals and Dreams, a small flower shop in Brooklyn owned by Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman whose hands moved like poetry among the stems. 8. Damien would arrive just as Luna finished arranging bouquets, watching her treat each flower like a precious jewel rather than a commodity. You're getting better at hiding among normal people, Luna teased, as they walked through Prospect Park. Damien had traded his $1,000 suits for jeans and simple shirts, though he still looked uncomfortably wealthy to anyone paying attention. Learning, Damien replied, watching children chase bubbles while their parents shared picnic lunches on worn blankets. I never realized how much life I was missing behind boardroom walls. Luna's tiny apartment was a miracle of organized chaos plants, cascading from every surface, canvases propped against walls, and the constant scent of jasmine tea brewing on a hot plate. Her younger sister Rose, a nursing student with Luna's same warm eyes but a sharper tongue, become Damien's unofficial interrogator. So let me understand this, Rose said, stirring pasta sauce while Luna set their small table. You're secretly dating my sister, but you're also engaged to someone else. Damien winced. It's complicated. Complicated as choosing between pizza toppings, Rose shot back. This is dishonest. Luna touched her sister's arm gently. Rose, please. No, she's right, Damien said quietly. I'm being a coward. I should have ended things with Evangeline weeks ago. Why haven't you? Rose demanded. The truth was painful to admit, 'cause I'm terrified of losing everything I've known, even if I've never been happy with it. Miguel Santos, who owned CAF Esperanza, where Luna worked afternoons, had become her protective older brother figure. A former Marine with tattoos telling stories of distant wars, he pulled Damien aside one busy Saturday afternoon. Listen, rich boy, Miguel said, wiping down coffee cups with military precision. Luna's been hurt before, last guy promised her. The moon then disappeared when his family found out she wasn't from their world. Damien's stomach dropped. I'm not him. Prove it, Miguel challenged. Because right now, you're playing the same game. Secret meetings, hidden relationship while you're publicly with someone else. How is that different? The question haunted Damien for days. Thursday evenings belonged to Luna's art classes at the Riverside Community Center. Damien would sit in the back, watching her teach children who reminded him of his younger self. Dreamers told their dreams weren't practical. Luna told 80-year-old Marcus, who was frustrated with his painting. Art is about showing people how you see the world. Watching her patience, her genuine care for each child, Damien understood why he'd fallen so completely. Luna didn't just make art, she made hope visible. Mr. Damien, called out Sophia, a precocious 7-year-old who'd adopted him. Will you help me paint my family? As Damien helped tiny hands guide brushes across paper, he realized this was what happiness felt like. Not the adrenaline of closing deals, but the quiet satisfaction of helping something beautiful come to life. Luna finally invited him to Sunday dinner with her extended family. The Martinez household exploded with warmth, chaos, and enough food to feed half of Brooklyn. Grandmothers argued about seasoning in rapid Spanish, while cousins played guitar and children ran through the house like joyful tornadoes. So you're the mysterious boyfriend, Luna's mother Carmen said with knowing eyes. Luna speaks of you often. Damien felt simultaneously welcomed and terrified. This was real family messy, loud, unconditionally loving. Everything his sterile upbringing had lacked. What do you do for work? Asked Luna's father Roberto, a construction foreman with hands that spoke of honest labor. Technology, Damien replied, the same vague answer he'd been giving for weeks. Roberto nodded approvingly. Good field, always growing. You take care of our Luna? Yes, sir. Trying to. Trying isn't enough, Roberto said gently but firmly. Luna deserves someone who chooses her every day, not someone who's still deciding.
Oh.
The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday evening. Damien arrived at Luna's apartment to find her crying over a laptop, Rose hovering protectively nearby. What happened? Damien asked, immediately moving to comfort her. Show him, Rose said coldly. Luna turned the laptop screen toward him. Displayed was a gossip website with photos of Damien and Evangeline at a charity gala the previous weekend. The headline read, Tech billionaire and shipping heiress plan summer wedding. Damien's blood turned to ice. Luna, I can explain, billionaire. Luna's voice was barely a whisper. You're Damien Cross. The Damien Cross. The secret he'd been dreading had finally surfaced. Yes, but that doesn't change anything between us. Everything changes. Luna stood abruptly, pain radiating from every pore. You lied to me for weeks. About who you are, about your engagement, about everything that matters. I wanted to tell you when. Luna's voice broke. After the wedding. After you'd gotten bored playing poor with the struggling artist? It's not like that. Damien reached for her, but she stepped back like he'd burned her. Get out, she whispered. Just get out, Luna. Please get out. The words tore from her throat like physical wounds. Damien stood there, watching the woman he loved look at him like he was everything wrong with the world. Rain lashed against the windows, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled like the sound of his heart, breaking. I love you, he said desperately. None of the money, none of the rest of it matters. I love you. Luna's brown eyes, bright with tears, met his one last time. Love isn't enough if you're too afraid to choose it. As Damien walked out into the storm, he realized she was right. He'd been living two lives because he was too cowardly to choose one. But losing Luna felt like losing the only part of himself that had ever been real. His phone buzzed with a text from Evangeline. Darling, the wedding planner needs to meet tomorrow. We simply must finalize the venue. Standing in the rain outside Luna's building, Damien Cross, billionaire heir, coward, finally understood the difference between having everything and having what mattered. 2 months passed like winter, cold, endless, and gray. Damien threw himself into wedding preparations with the enthusiasm of a man preparing for his own execution. Evangeline planned their future with military precision while he signed contracts, and smiled for photographers, playing the role of devoted fiancés with hollow expertise. But late at night, alone in his penthouse, he would stare at Luna's business card and wonder if love was supposed to hurt this much. The call came on a Thursday morning while Damien reviewed quarterly reports that meant nothing anymore. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom with unusual urgency. Sir, there's a Miguel Santos here to see you. Says it's about Luna Martinez. He says it's urgent. Damien's heart stopped. Send him up immediately. Miguel entered the executive office like a storm front, his military bearing barely containing rage that made the air vibrate with tension. His dark eyes swept over Damien's designer suit and marbled desk with undisguised contempt. Your girl's in the hospital, Miguel said without preamble. Pneumonia. Had been working herself to death since you disappeared. 3 jobs, remember? Couldn't afford to take time off to recover from the flu. The world tilted sideways. Is she? She's stable. Barely. Miguel's hands clenched into fists. Rose called me because Luna's asking for you. Even after what you did, she's asking for you. That girl loves you enough to forgive a coward. Question is, are you man enough to deserve it? Damien was moving. Before Miguel finished speaking. Which hospital? Brooklyn Methodist. But before you go playing hero, you should know your fiancé's been busy. Ice flooded Damien's veins. What do you mean? 2 weeks ago? Some private investigator showed up at Luna's jobs. Was asking questions, taking photos. Yesterday, the flower shop fired her. Today, the community center cut her program due to budget. Concerns. Guess who's been making generous donations to their competitors? The room spun. Evangeline, your princess doesn't like loose ends. She's systematically destroying Luna's life. If you think it stops there, you're more naive than I thought. Miguel turned to leave, then paused at the door. Hospitals! In room 314. But maybe you should ask yourself if loving someone means protecting them from your world, not dragging them into it. Damien spent the elevator ride to the parking garage making phone calls that would have destroyed lesser men. By the time he reached Brooklyn Methodist, he'd liquidated enough assets to buy the hospital twice over. But all the money in the world couldn't erase the sight that greeted him in room 314. Luna lay small and fragile against white sheets. Her vibrant spirit dimmed to a flickering candle. An IV dripped antibiotics into her arm, and her breathing came shallow and labored. Rose sat beside her, exhaustion etched in every line of her young face. She's been like this for 3 days, Rose whispered, not looking at him. Kept working. Even when she could barely stand? Said she couldn't afford to be sick? I didn't know. The words felt inadequate, pathetic. Would it have mattered? Rose finally met his eyes, and her anger was a living thing. You chose your perfect life over her. Don't come here with guilt as an excuse for caring. Luna's eyes fluttered open, focusing slowly on his face. Damien. Her voice was barely a whisper. I'm here. Took her hand, shocked by how cold her fingers felt. I'm so sorry, Luna, for everything. I lost my jobs, she said weakly. All of them. And the gallery I was saving for, someone bought the building and tripled the rent. 15 years of dreams, gone in 2 weeks. Damien's chest constricted, until he could barely breathe. Luna, It was her, wasn't it? Your fiancé. Luna's golden-flecked eyes held no accusation, only exhausted acceptance. She wanted to make sure I understood my place. The admission felt like swallowing glass. Yes, Luna closed her eyes. You didn't just break my heart, Damien. You broke my life. Rose stood abruptly. I think you should leave. Wait, Luna's voice stopped them both. There's something else. Something I need to tell you. She struggled to sit up, and Damien helped her, his heart breaking at how fragile she felt in his arms. I'm pregnant. The words hit like a physical blow. The hospital room spun, as the implications crashed over him like a tsunami. A child. There. Child. A piece of their love that Evangeline's cruelty couldn't touch. How long have you known? He whispered. 2 weeks, since right before I got sick. Tears streamed down Luna's face. I was going to call you, but then everything started falling apart.
I couldn't he?
Didn't want you to think I was trying to trap you. Rose moved to Luna's other side, protective fury radiating from her small frame. Will you tell him? Now that he's already chosen his billions over you? Rose, please. Luna's voice held exhaustion beyond her years. I just thought he deserved to know. Damien stared at Luneth, the woman he loved, carrying his child. Destroyed by his cowardice and his fiancée's vindictive cruelty, everything he'd The thought he understood about his life crumbled to dust. "I'll leave Evangeline," he said suddenly. "I'll walk away from everything. The company, the money, all of it. We'll figure it out together." Luna smiled sadly. "With what?" "She's made sure I can't work anywhere in the city. Your father will destroy you if you leave. What kind of life is that for a child? I don't care about the money, you say that now." Luna's eyes held a wisdom that broke his heart. "But you've never been poor, Damien. Really poor. You've never chosen between medicine and food. Never worked 3 jobs just to afford paint. You don't know what you're offering to give up." Rose stepped forward, her young face aged by protective love. "She's right. And even if you meant it, how long before you resented us for costing you everything? How long before you looked at your child and saw the price of your choices?" The truth of their words hit him like a sledgehammer. He was Damien Cross, heir to billions, trained from birth to think in terms of acquisitions and losses. Could he really walk away from everything he'd ever known? Could he survive in Luna's world without destroying what he loved about it? "So what are you saying?" he asked, though he already knew the answer would devastate him. Luna took his hand, her touch gentle despite everything. "I'm saying goodbye, Damien. For real this time. Marry your fiancé. Build your empire. Be who you were born to be, and our child. We'll grow up free from all this poison." Luna's voice grew stronger, more resolute. "I won't let our baby become a pawn in your family's games. I won't let them grow up in a world where love is a commodity and people are acquisitions. Luna, you can't. I can, and I will." She met his eyes with heartbreaking finality. "This is my choice, Damien. The one choice your money can't buy or your fiancé can't destroy. I'm choosing to protect what we created, even if it means losing you forever." As Damien walked out of that hospital room, leaving behind the only woman he'd ever loved and the child he'd never know, I'd finally understood the true price of being a Cross. It wasn't the money or the power or the empire. It was the complete inability to choose love when it mattered most. His phone buzzed with a text from Evangeline. "Darling, the caterer needs final numbers by tomorrow. I do hope you haven't forgotten our engagement party this weekend." Standing in the hospital parking lot, Damien Cross realized that some prisons were built not with bars, but with expectations too heavy to escape. 6 months later, the wedding. Everyone called the event of the decade was 3 days away. Damien stood in his penthouse, adjusting a bodie that felt like a noose. While Manhattan's elite prepared to celebrate his surrender to duty, the engagement party had been a masterpiece of social theater. Evangeline had worn diamonds that caught, the light like ice crystals, and Damien had played the devoted fiancé, while his soul died a little more with each congratulation. The society pages proclaimed them the perfect power couple, and the stock prices for both companies soared. But late at night, when the champagne wore off and the cameras stopped flashing, Damien would lie awake calculating months and weeks, wondering if Luna had felt their child kick yet, wondering if she ever thought of him. He tried to have money transferred to accounts Rose could access, but every attempt was blocked. His father's investigators had made it clear that any contact with Luna Martinez would result in immediate disinheritance and legal consequences that would destroy not just him, but anyone who helped him. The golden cage had become an iron box, and Theodore Cross held the only key. "Sir," his assistant knocked softly. "There's a delivery for you." The courier insisted it be given to you personally. The package was small, wrapped in brown paper with no return address. Inside, a single item made Damien's world stop spinning. A small canvas, no bigger than his hand, showing 2 figures walking through Washington Square Park. The paint was still fresh, and in the corner, written in Luna's flowing script, "For when you forget what freedom looked like." Beneath the canvas lay a letter written on paper that smelled faintly of jasmine tea. "Damien, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Rose and I are leaving the city tonight. But don't try to find us. Don't try to follow. This isn't cruel Teet's mercy. Want you to know that our daughter kicks like she's trying to paint the walls of my womb. I tell her stories about her father. It's the man who taught me that even caged birds remember how to sing. I'll make sure she knows you wanted her, even if you couldn't choose her." I'm naming her Hope, because that's what you gave me, even if we couldn't keep it. Your wedding will be beautiful. Your empire will grow. Your father will be proud. And someday, when you're old and successful and surrounded by everything money can buy, I hope you remember that love was always the only thing worth having. Don't come looking for us. Let us be free in the way you never could be. Forever yours. LUNAPS. There's something else you need to know about your perfect fiancé. Check the enclosed flash drive. Some cages are more dangerous than others. Damien's hands shook as he inserted the flash drive into his laptop. What he found there made his blood turn to ice. Financial records showing payments to private investigators, bribes to employers, and most damning of all, recorded conversations between Evangeline and her father, discussing Luna's systematic removal from Damien's life. But the final file was a video that stopped his heart entirely. Evangeline sat in what looked like a private office, speaking to someone off camera. Her voice was cold, calculating, nothing like the sweet tone she used in public. The Martinez girl is more resilient than expected. Losing her jobs wasn't enough. She's still painting, still hoping. We need something more permanent. What are you suggesting? The voice off camera sounded nervous. An accident, nothing traceable, just enough to ensure she understands that some people don't get happy endings. Damien's laptop screen went dark as the video ended, but the implications blazed in his mind like fire. Evangeline hadn't just destroyed Luna's career, she'd been planning something worse, something permanent. His phone rang. Theodore's name flashed on the screen like a death warrant. Damien, the rehearsal dinner's in 2 hours. Don't be late.
Das.
I need to tell you something. Not now. The Whitmores have arrived, and I'm not marrying Evangeline. Silence stretched across the line like a chasm opening between father and son. What did you say? I said I'm not marrying Evangeline Whitmore. Not tomorrow. Not ever. Theodore's voice dropped to a whisper that could freeze hell. You will be at that altar tomorrow, or I will destroy you so completely that even the homeless man sharing sandwiches with stray dogs will have more than you and destroy me. Damien felt something break free in his chest, like chains snapping after years of pressure. But I won't marry a woman who tried to have the mother of my child killed. The mother of your Theodore's voice cracked like breaking glass. You fool. You absolute fool. Maybe, but I'd rather be a fool who chose love than a success who never learned what it meant. Damien hung up and immediately called his lawyer, his accountant. Everyone who could help him liquidate assets before his father froze everything. He had maybe 6 hours before Theodore's fury descended. Like a biblical plague, the rehearsal dinner was supposed to begin in 1 hour. Instead, Damien was in his car, racing through city streets with nothing but a duffel bag of essentials and a heart finally free to choose its own direction. He found Miguel at Café Esperanza, closing up for the night. The former Marine took one look at Damien's face and nodded like he'd been expecting this moment for months. She's in Portland, Miguel said without being asked. Rose got into a nursing program at OHSU. Luna's working at a small gallery teaching. Kids again. Baby's due next month. Will you give me the address? Miguel studied him for a long moment. You sure about this? Walking away from billions isn't something you can undo. I was never sure about anything until right now. What about your psycho ex-fiancé? Women like that don't take rejection well. Damien pulled out his phone and showed Miguel the video. She's about to have bigger problems than a broken engagement. I've already sent copies to the FBI, the DA's office, and 3 major news outlets. By morning, she'll be too busy with lawyers to worry about me. Miguel's grin was fierce and approving. Luna always said you had potential. Guess she was right. The address led to a small apartment complex in Portland's Hawthorne district. Damien stood outside for 10 minutes, trying to find courage he'd never needed in any boardroom. Finally, he knocked. Rose answered the door, her eyes widening in shock. Damien, is she here? Is she okay? Rose's protective instincts warred with something else in her expression. Hope, maybe, or simple exhaustion from carrying her sister's heartbreak for so long. She's painting on the back porch. The baby makes it hard for her to sleep. Damien walked through the small apartment, noting the carefully arranged furniture. The medical textbooks stacked on a second-hand desk, the photos of family gatherings he'd never been part of. It felt more like home than his penthouse ever had. Luna sat on the back porch with a canvas propped on her swollen belly, painting the sunset with colors that made the ordinary sky look like a masterpiece. She was more beautiful than he remembered, glowing with impending motherhood, her dark hair longer, her face fuller, but somehow more herself than ever. "Hello, Luna." She looked up, and for a moment, the paintbrush slipped from her fingers. "Damien, but your wedding was called off about 6 hours ago, along with my inheritance, my company, and everything else that came with the cross name." Luna struggled to stand, and Damien moved quickly to help her, his hands gentle on her arms. This close, he could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes, the small scar above her eyebrow, all the details he'd memorized and treasured during sleepless nights. "You left everything?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I left everything that didn't matter. I came for everything that does." "Damien, you don't understand. I can't." She gestured helplessly at her condition, at the modest surroundings, at the vast gulf between their worlds. "I understand that I've spent my whole life being afraid to choose what mattered. I understand that I let the woman I love slip away because I was a coward. I understand that our daughter deserves a father who fights for her instead of one who hides behind family expectations." Luna's eyes filled with tears. "She kicks every time I play music. I think she's going to be artistic like her mother, or stubborn like her father." Damien reached out tentatively, and Luna guided his hand to her belly. The moment he felt their child move beneath his palm, every sacrifice became worthwhile. "Luna, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I hurt you in ways that money can't fix and apologies can't undo, but I'm here now, with nothing but love and a promise that I'll choose you every day for the rest of our lives, if you'll let me." Luna studied his face with an artist's eye for truth. "What about your father, your company, everything you've worked for?" Theodore Cross spent his whole life building an empire that made him rich and miserable. "I won't make the same mistake." Damien smiled, feeling lighter than he had in months. "Besides, I've been thinking about opening a small gallery. Maybe somewhere local artists can afford to show their work. I might need a partner who knows something about art and everything about hope." "The FBI came by this morning," Luna said quietly, "asked questions about Evangeline, about threats and intimidation. Rose said someone had sent them evidence. Cages are meant to be escaped. Others are meant to be locked from the outside." Luna laughed through her tears, the sound like music after months of silence. "You really gave up everything? The penthouse, the cars, the life you've always known?" "I gave up everything that was keeping me from living." As the sun set over Portland, painting the sky in colors, Luna would spend the next day trying to capture. Damien Cross held the woman he loved and felt their child kick against his palm. He had no money, no company, no inheritance waiting for him. He had never been richer in his life. Rose appeared in the doorway, her arms crossed, but her expression soft. "I suppose you'll be wanting to stay for dinner. Fair warning, it's left over. Take out and whatever I could find in the fridge." "Sounds perfect," Damien said, meaning it completely. 3 weeks later, Hope Luna Cross was born at 3:17 a.m., weighing 6 pounds and 2 ounces of pure possibility. She had her mother's dark hair and her father's gray eyes. And when she wrapped her tiny fingers around Damien's thumb, he knew he'd finally learned the difference between having everything and having what mattered. The gallery opened 6 months later in a converted warehouse in Portland's Arts District. Local newspapers called it a space where dreams take flight, and within a year, it had launched the careers of dozens of artists who'd never had a chance to show their work. Damien kept one painting in his private, fishy a small canvas showing 2 figures walking through Washington Square Park, painted by the woman who'd taught him that love was always the only thing worth having. Sometimes, late at night when Hope slept peacefully in her crib and Luna painted by moonlight, Damien would get calls from his father. Theodore would offer reconciliation, a return to the empire, a chance to reclaim everything he'd thrown away for love. Damien always hung up without answering, then went to hold his daughter and watch his wife create beauty from nothing but hope, and paint. He'd finally learned that some choices weren't choices at all. They were chances to become who you were always meant to be. And in a small apartment in Portland, surrounded by the woman he loved and the child they'd created together, Damien, Cross discovered that the richest man in the world was simply the one who'd chosen correctly when it mattered most. The end.